Hello everyone, I'm Ash and I'm here to welcome you to 10 minutes of gushing praise and horror frothing on Leigh Whannell's latest masterpiece that has just hit cinemas, since I had a bloody excellent time with it last night. Spoiler free of course, except that it features a man who turns invisible, which I bet you didn't see that coming. Oh, why did I write that in? Moving swiftly on. Whilst the start of the year hasn't been so hot on the blockbuster horror front, the Saw genius has come to save us with this shockingly sturdy retooling of The Invisible Man, a property which not so long ago was intended for the big budget treatment as part of Universal's abandoned dark universe. Instead, Whannell's take couldn't feel much more different. A refreshingly stripped down and scaled back genre film that is more concerned with tone, atmosphere and performance than it is over-the-top set pieces, though there are plenty of those to savour as well. There's a couple of logical hoops to jump through, but really, it's a horror movie about a man that turns himself invisible, as I mentioned, so we can absolutely stretch the imagination. It is an extremely well-conceived film for the most part, that takes a beloved property and puts a fantastic new spin on it, and better yet, has something actually worthwhile to say too. So let's get to reviewing it and breaking it down bit by bit, shall we? I am the visible Ash from WhatCulture, and this is the Invisible Man review. 9. Elisabeth Moss's incredible performance. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, Elisabeth Moss gives a terrific performance in this movie, and is absolutely the reason you should go and see it. She is entirely convincing as a woman riddled with PTSD, and her increasing desperation to make others believe her admittedly suspicious story makes for brilliantly frustrating viewing. Though it's hardly a one-woman show, the entire movie is near enough carried on Moss's back, especially as the really big moments, though fantastic, are relatively sparse and modest. This is really more of a drama than it is a genre spectacle, and so it needed a performer of Moss's caliber to dig deep into the film's thorny themes and tether a potentially silly story to the ground. That she's often made up as a real flesh and blood woman who looks as traumatized and tired as the situation calls for is the cherry on the cake too, as it is wonderful to see someone that looks relatable on the screen. Shout out to Aldis Hodge and Storm Reed for absolutely smashing the supporting roles too. The whole thing feels like a believable, engaging collection of people you really want to come out of this debacle still being okay. 8. Leigh Whannell's exceptional direction. Writer-director Leigh Whannell has sure come a long way since entering the film industry as the writer of the first 3 Saw films, and in 2015 making his directorial debut as helmer of Insidious Chapter 3. Whannell proved with the absolutely phenomenal upgrade that he could turn in imaginative results on a low budget, as likely won him the opportunity to both write and direct The Invisible Man in the first place. This film marks another bold step forward for the Aussie filmmaker, who impressively makes the mere $7 million production look several times more expensive than that. While on one hand he makes sparing use of visual effects and often relies on both the negative space of the empty frame and the stunning work of his sound team, Whannell also does a remarkable job with the brief bursts of shocking violence, utilising off-puttingly jolting camera work reminiscent of his prior work on Upgrade. The result is a film that often feels more like an art house joint than a genre flick being released by Universal, but at the same time, it knows when to let loose with the gonzo action. 7. The consistently tense atmosphere. From its very first scene, this film is absolutely awash in paranoia-laced tension, and much of it comes down to how Whannell allows the audience to fill in many of the blanks themselves. There are numerous sequences where Cecilia is in an otherwise empty room and Whannell simply pans to an area of the room where the Invisible Man may or may not be standing. Just as the Paranormal Activity movies derive most of their thrills from the viewer's own imagination, much of what makes The Invisible Man so enjoyable is trying to make a sense of what's going on beyond what we can actually see. And if something is even lurking there at all. The result is a film that remains consistently tense throughout, and even once Whannell eventually stops toying with the audience and gets into the nitty-gritty of the film's title, the presence is extremely unnerving. 6. Negatives feel incredibly hard to justify. Whilst the atmosphere is definitely one of the film's strongest and most well-earned accolades, the only real negatives I can spin on the movie, and even then they are not big ones, are the very few moments that Cecilia's situation could be resolved with a security camera. Really though, these are probably reasonably explained away outside of the main narrative, since we don't need time to dwell on every finicky detail when we're invested in simply surviving this whole ordeal. Perhaps there could be more horror moments, but only if you're picking holes. There is a thick vein of horror that runs subtly throughout that serves wonderfully well on its own, as well as plot moments that will have you jumping and gasping in equal measure. One gasp in particular is just woof, woof. And even still, some would argue that it's too long a movie. But with perfect pacing and everything adding up to a sensational whole, I would say that feels like a cheap criticism. There really isn't much to not like about this film. 5. The massively timely themes. Many critics have already labelled The Invisible Man as a Me Too horror film, which might actually be a pretty reductive way to describe a movie that certainly has its finger on the pulse of the current zeitgeist. In a time where people are feeling more empowered than ever to come forward and shame their abusers, and our collective society is encouraged to believe these accusations, it is quite ingenious that this take on The Invisible Man is steeped so heavily in the scars of domestic abuse, and the struggles that people still face with being believed. Understandably, few of Cecilia's friends or family believe that she is being stalked by an invisible presence, which serves as a not-so-subtle allegory for the skepticism that many abused women are met with in real life. Of course, it is in no way a direct or tidy parallel, but it is nevertheless a clever way to make the well-trod tale of the Invisible Man feel current and thoroughly of the moment. Yet at the same time, the themes are pulled into the film's overall fabric well enough that it doesn't feel like WANNELL is battering the viewer over the head. It's a message that will resonate with different audiences on varying levels, and is expertly crafted to do so. 4. Benjamin Wallfisch's Thunderous musical score. Benjamin Wallfisch, the man behind Blade Runner 2049 and It, if you need a little musical refresher, is fast establishing himself as one of the most talented movie composers working today, as he adds another impressively evocative score to his list with his work on The Invisible Man. Though much of the film emphasises eerie quiet, Wallfisch's score is employed to brilliantly bombastic effect at a number of critical junctures, especially during the more chaotic third act, in turn evoking the operatic tenor of the earlier Invisible Man movies. Above all else, the score accentuates the strong feeling of dread pervading throughout, and despite the project's low budget, the music has a strong sense of identity. Whilst the quieter moments still stand as some of the most haunting, whenever the music kicks in, there is a drop in your stomach and unshakable tension that is wonderfully implemented and put to terrifyingly good use. 3. The thrilling action sequences. Though most of the action in this movie is relatively modest, WANNELL ensures that what audiences get is absolutely riveting. Remember Upgrade, which you should absolutely watch and is perhaps the best film of 2018? Well, the cheesy Dorito dust fingers of that movie are all over this one. The trailers have trained much of their focus on Cecilia's encounter with the Invisible Man at a hospital, and indeed, this is certainly the most extensive and technically polished set piece in the film, even if it does come late enough that it feels like the trailer spoiled all of the good stuff along the way. As with Upgrade's brutal action, WANNELL strikes an expert balance of making these scenes both wince-inducingly violent and terrifying, employing creative use of the titular character's key ability whilst accompanied by silky smooth camera work. That WANNELL was able to achieve so much with so little money is absolutely staggering, especially considering the pronounced VFX elements in the third act of the movie. 2. The amazing sound design. As previously mentioned, aside from Benjamin Wallfisch's musical score, so much of the movie works as well as it does because it takes full advantage of the fact that the Invisible Man keeps quiet and allows Cecilia to stew in her own seemingly paranoid silence. The first scene in the movie, where we witness Cecilia fleeing from her abusive ex-boyfriend Adrian, is largely underscored by blowing wind and smaller incidental noises, and it creates a chilly, ominous mood from the outset. Many of the film's other suspense sequences employ similarly minimalist sound design, as is almost unheard of in horror films adapted from named properties. Again though, WANNELL knows when to focus on the sinister calm and when to crank up Wallfisch's score to 11, continually pushing and pulling the viewer between these two extremes. 1. It's a rare reboot that really works. With this movie unexpectedly turning out as well as it did, it is hilarious to consider that Universal very nearly made a larger budget Johnny Depp starring Invisible Man just a few years ago, as was said to be part of the studio's planned and quickly cancelled Dark Universe. Rather than a $200 million slice of star-studded schlock, we ended up with a thoughtful, modest, and brilliantly acted film which, if nothing else, proves the triumph of a filmmaker's imagination over the need for executives to line their pockets with cynical, tentpole movies. Yet with this take on The Invisible Man tracking to be a stonking box office hit, it looks like a win-win for everyone involved, while indicating to studios that they needn't risk monstrous budgets to revitalise beloved IP. A happy ending after all. And that has been our lovely review of The Invisible Man. Have you seen the movie? What did you think of it? And if not, are you going to catch it before it leaves cinemas? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. I've been Ash, and this
I've been really patient here. Are you nearly done? This is my studio slot.
No, on the thing it says The Invisible Man, so I think you'll find that sneaking up on me in the studio is not what was booked in.
It says The Invisible Man because I booked it, the literally invisible man. You idiot. Get out. What's up, guys? I'm from WhatCulture.